Hi, good day everyone. I am Angeline Sanchez and I will be discussing about the TPR or the Total Physical Response by James Usher. But before anything else, before we proceed to our main discussion, and as you can see in the screen we have Dr. James Usher. So who is um, James Usher? James Usher, this is an American professor by the name of James Usher, developed an approach to language teaching commonly referred to as Total Physical Response or TPR. So this work began in the 1960s and theorizes that memory is improved through an association with physical movements. So there are many activities that can occur with using the TPR approach, which helps children develop language using movements. So this activity supports the classroom curriculum and are not only motivating but a lot of fun. So let us first consider a general approach to foreign language instruction, which has been named the comprehension approach. So it is called this because of the importance it gives to listening comprehension. Most of the other methods we have looked and have students speaking that target language from the first day. So in the 1960s, James Usher's research gave rise to the hypothesis that language learning starts first with understanding and ends with production. So after the learner internalizes an extensive map of how the target language works, speaking will appear spontaneously. Of course, the student's speech will not be perfect, but gradually speech will become more target-like. Notice that this is exactly how an infant acquires its native language. So a baby spends many months listening to the people around it long before it ever says a word. The child has the time to try to make sense out of the sounds it hears. So no one tells the baby that it must speak. The child chooses to speak when it is ready to do so. So there are several methods being practiced today that have in common an attempt to apply this observation to language instruction. So there are four methods according to James Usher, and now we will be tackling about the fourth method, which is the James Usher's Total Physical Response or TPR. So it is the one we will examine in detail here in order to see how the principle of the comprehension approach are put into practice. TPR stands for Total Physical Response and was created by Dr. James J. Usher. Total Physical Response or TPR, it is a method of teaching language or vocabulary concepts by using physical movement to react to verbal input. The process mimics the way that infants learn their first language, and it reduces student inhibition and lowers stress. The purpose of TPR is to create a brain link between speech and action to boost language and vocabulary learning. So, it is based upon the way that children learn their mother tongue. So, parents have language, body conversation with their children. The parent instructs and the child physically responds to this. For example, as a parent says, "Look at mommy, give me the ball," and the child does so, this conversation continues for many months before the child actually starts to speak itself. So even though it can't speak during this time, the child is taking in all of the language, the sounds and the patterns. Eventually, when it has decoded enough, the child reproduces the language quite spontaneously. Okay. So we don't often think of total physical response or the TPR, but many games and activities have TPR fundamentals built in, both directly and indirectly. And one also good example is the Simon Says game. Playing Simon Says the teacher gives a command and students should only do it if the teacher Simon says at the start. So the teacher might say, Simon says, slice some bread, or Simon says, chop an onion, and the students must do the action. However, if the teacher says what's an egg, then the students shouldn't do this. If anyone does the action that Simon doesn't say, then they are out and have to watch for the mistakes of other students. So that's a one example of TPR in a classroom setting. We will next turn to our 10 questions in order to increase our understanding of total physical response. So first we have the question, what are the goals of teachers who use TPR? So teachers who use TPR believe in the importance of having their students enjoy their experience of learning to communicate in another language. In fact, TPR was developed in order to reduce the stress people feel when they are studying other languages and thereby encourage students to persist in their study beyond a beginning level of proficiency. The way to do this, Asher believes, is to base foreign language learning upon the way children learn their native language. The second one, what is the role of the teacher? What is the role of the student? Initially, the teacher is the director of all students' behavior. All the students are imitators of her nonverbal model. So the teacher plays an active and direct role in the total physical response. So, in other words, for example, in the stage play, the instructor is the director of the stage play, in which the students are the actors. So it is the teacher who decides what to teach, who models and presents the new materials, and who selects supporting materials for classroom use. So what are some characteristics of the teaching learning process? That's the third question. So the first phase of a lesson is one of modeling. The teacher issues commands to a few students, then perform the actions with them. So in the second phase, the same students demonstrate that they can understand the commands by performing them alone. The observer also have an opportunity to demonstrate their understanding. And the teacher next combines elements of the commands to have students develop flexibility in understanding and familiar utterances. So these commands which students perform are often numerous. After learning to respond to some oral commands, the students learn to read and write them. When students are ready to speak, they become the one who issue the commands. After students begin speaking, and activities expand to include skit and games. In an instance, when TPR is applied in the classroom, a teacher is required to provide a model. In addition, when TPR is applied in the classroom, a teacher is required to provide a model. The model has three vital features. One, grasping the spoken language must come prior to speaking. Comprehension develops through body movement, and the period of listening period helps a learner to be ready to speak. 4. What is the nature of student-teacher interaction, and what is the nature of student-student interaction? So the teacher interacts with a whole group of students and with individual students. Initially, the interaction is characterized by the teacher speaking and the students and responding non-verbally. Later on, the students become more verbal and the teacher responds non-verbally. Students perform the actions together. Students can learn by watching each other. At some point, however, Asher believes observers must demonstrate their understanding of the commands in order to retain them. As students begin to speak, they issue commands to one another as well as to the teacher. Next is how the feelings of the students dealt with. One of the main reasons TPR was developed was to reduce the stress people feel when studying other languages. One of the primary ways this is accomplished is to allow learners to speak when they are ready. Forcing them to speak before then will only create anxiety. Also, when students to begin to speak, perfection should not be expected. Another way to relieve anxiety is to make language learning as enjoyable as possible. The use of zany commands and humorous skits are two ways of showing that language learning can be fun. Finally, it is important that there not be too much modeling, but that students not be too rushed either. Feelings of success and no anxiety facilitate learning. Next is, how is the language viewed and how is culture viewed? Just as with the acquisition of the native language, the oral modality is primary, and the culture is the lifestyle of people who speak the language natively. Next, what areas of language are emphasized? And what language skills are emphasized? So, vocabulary and grammatical structures are emphasized over other language areas. So, these are imbued within imperatives. So, the imperatives are single words and multi-word chunk. One reason for the use of imperative is the frequency of occurrence and the speech directed at young children learning their native language. Understanding the spoken word should precede its production. So the spoken language emphasizes over written language. Students often do not learn to read the commands they have already learned to perform until or after hours of instruction. Next, what is the role of students' native language? So TPR is usually introduced in the student's native language. After the introduction, rarely would the native language be used, meaning is made clear through body movements. So how is evaluation accomplished? Teacher will know immediately whether or not students understand by observing their students' actions. Formal evaluations can be conducted simply by commanding individual students to perform a series of actions. As students become more advanced, their performance of skits they have created can become the basis of for evaluation. So the last question, how does the teacher respond to the student error? It is expected the students will make errors when they first begin speaking. So teachers should be tolerant of them and only correct major errors. Even this should be corrected unobtrusively as students get more advanced. Teachers can fine-tune or correct more minor errors. The major technique, as we saw in the lesson we observed, is the use of commands to direct behavior. Usher acknowledges that although this technique is powerful, a variety of activities is preferred for maintaining student interest. So we have three techniques here, which going to the first one, which is using commands to direct behavior. Using commands to direct behavior, the use of commands is the major technique of TPR. It is given to make the meaning of the command clearer. So it should be clear from the class. We observe that the use of commands is the major technique of TPR. So the commands are given to get students to perform an action. The action makes the meaning of the command clear. Since Usher suggests keeping the pace lively, it is necessary for a teacher to plan in advance. Just will introduce a lesson. To give an example, okay, rule reversal. So rule reversal, students commands their teacher and classmates to perform some actions. Usher says that students will want to speak after 10 to 20 hours of instruction. Although some students may take longer, students should not be encouraged to speak until they are ready. So action sequence, at one point we saw the teacher. Okay, action sequence. So at one point we saw the teacher give connected commands. For example, the teacher told the students to point to the door, then walk to the door and touch the door. As the students learn more and more of the target language, a longer series of connected commands can be given, which together comprise a whole procedure. While we did not see a long action sequence in this very first class, a little later on, students might receive the following instruction, which they act out. Take out a pen, take out a piece of paper, write a letter. Fold the letter, put in an envelope, seal the envelope. So write the address in the envelope, put a stamp in the envelope, mail the letter. This series of commands is called an action sequence or an operation. Many everyday activities like writing a letter can be broken down into an action sequence.
So thank you for listening everyone. Mabuhay.